The Closers on NewsTalk 1240 KLIK and NewsTalk 1400 KFRU.
And welcome back. It's the Closers here. I'm George Young. Tommy Wheelahan alongside, and he's moving from room to room right now. But Joe on the phone with us here very shortly is going to be Joe Gagliano Jr., and he is the author of No Gray Areas. It is basically it's the story of what happened with Arizona State, his involvement of it. The foreword was written by Andre Wadsworth, and man, it's just an amazing tale, Tom. The foreword right away from Andre. A read that will have you saying, wow, watch your thoughts, for they become words. Your words become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny.
It's intriguing, I'm telling you, George. Yeah. It's something that people only fantasize about, but for this young man, it was the real story.
Yes, it was. And as I was telling Joe off the air, you read that first paragraph. And Joe, you back with us here already?
Yes, I'm here, George.
Okay, there you are. Awesome. It's again, Joe, welcome to the show here. I really do appreciate being here on the Closers. I'm George Young, Tommy Wheelahan, former NFL player and former Missouri Tiger here with us on the show as well. I read this first paragraph on the introduction, and it says, the buzzer sounded. I just fixed 3 college basketball games in a row. I gently smiled as a cool $5 million went right into my pocket. A few short years later, however, my joy and abundance would come to an end, almost to the point of suicide. As of this writing, I'm sitting on a wooden stool, typing my story on an antiquated 20-plus-year-old typewriter with no correction tape, while currently an inmate in a federal prison for the second time in my life. As I told you off the air, it grabs you right away. It's incredibly interesting, and it's scary as hell. How did this whole thing start for you, and where are you at now in your life? Just kind of run that through for us.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, George, that's a loaded question. I could probably talk for about a half hour on those 2 points right there. But, it's been an interesting journey, and to hear you read that paragraph, it intrigues me, too. And, I found myself a couple times as I've been reading and editing and tweaking the book as many times as I have over the last pretty much 2 years. Just can't believe that was my life. So it's been one heck of a journey. The ASU thing was 1993, 94. Still to this day, one of the largest scandals in sports history. I was trading bonds at the Board of Trade in Chicago. I was making a heck of a lot of money at a young age and single with a heck of a lot of access to funds. And my brother was going to Arizona State University. And one of the kids that lived next door to my brother on campus was a bookmaker. He was a bookmaker from New York, and being at the Board of Trade, if everyone down there has a vice, either gambling or drugs. Well, I've never done a drug in my life, but I certainly learned how to gamble, and sports gambling was something that I learned, and I had a lot of early success with. So on one of the trips over here to Tempe, Arizona to visit my brother, and I was introduced to this kid, Benny Stillman, and Benny had a bookmaking racket over there at ASU, and one thing led to another, and I developed a little bit of a relationship with Benny over the years, as I wrote about in the book, and it turned out Benny had one of the key players on the ASU team that year, Headache Smith, who was an absolute stud. Kid led the NCAA in minutes played and 3-point field goals and Pac-10 All-Defensive Player of the Year. And I guess this kid, Headache Smith, got into Benny for some dollars in his bookmaking operation, and the plan was hatched.
And it just sounds like the opening line of a really bad joke. 2 basketball players, a barista, and an investment counselor walk into a casino in Vegas. ... and fill it in from there. Does this kind of highlight, and I know this was back in the 93-94 season, and here we are 2015-16 basketball season. Does this really highlight how easy it is to get a basketball player under control, especially with the amount of money that is out there to be made, that doesn't come the way of a college basketball player?
Well, I'll tell you what, guys, the ease of how it was done still astonishes me. In light of what just happened here in tennis and in light of some of the recent speculation that's going out there in gaming and in sports and athletes, it does nothing in my mind but make me wonder as to how much of this stuff actually does happen without no one even suspecting anything.
Joseph, Tom Willen here. First of all, I appreciate you talking about what's gone on in your life. I guess I have two questions. Number one, back in the mid-'80s when I played at Missouri, and Andre might even be able to tell you about this, in my fraternity house, we had 4 or 5 guys who were bookmaking, and they had, if you're familiar with Missouri, Columbia's right in the middle, St. Louis, KC are 2 hours apart. It is easy for the big guys and the bosses to get their little runners and filtrate the athletes. So when these bookmakers go after athletes, do they kind of go after a guy, A, he's got to be good, B, they look back at his financial situation, C, how bad do they need the money? Are those the things that kind of go into, because like George said, it was easy then, it had to be easy for you.
Oh, yeah. You know what? It was real simple. But you know what? It's challenging. And I've talked to Dre, and I got him here, and I've got you guys on speakerphone, so hopefully the sound quality is good. But, I've talked to Dre about this many a times, Andre, who's next door to me here, and it's challenging to fix and to determine a team sport. I mean, you look at you look at trying to accomplish some type of point shaving scheme or fix on a football game. I think it would be next to impossible. When you have 11 players on the field, even if you had the quarterback, I mean, how many poor plays can that quarterback make before that coach is going to pull him? So I think it's next to impossible to fix a baseball game. Unless you're going to bet the over on the game and a pitcher wants to throw some cheese right down the middle for the first 2 innings and give up, 6 or 7 runs, then maybe you got a good shot at it. I think it's pretty darn difficult to fix a basketball game nowadays because unlike the situation with Headache Smith and ASU and Bill Frieder, Headache Smith played just about every minute of every game. He led the NCAA in minutes played. And Frieder let Headache pretty much run the show for that team. I don't think there's that many coaches that will give the full reins to their players like that and let their players do what they want to do. So I think the only sports nowadays, to touch on your point, that can really be affected and fixed are individual sports. I'm a firm believer MMA is as corrupt as possible. I'm a firm believer tennis is as corrupt as possible. Soccer, with sports like soccer or sports like hockey, you want to talk about fixing team sports? Soccer or hockey are probably the two lowest hanging fruit games out there you could fix. You give me a hockey player, a hockey goalie, in the twilight of his career, making substandard dollars on an annual basis that knows he only has a year or 2 left in his career, and bet the over on the game. In today's gambling world, internationally, whether it's in Europe or whether it's in Australia, there's countless dollars you can make action on that game with. So you bet the over 4.5 or over 5 goals for the game, and the guy lets 3 or 4 shots go through his wicket in the first period, you got a pretty good chance of success.
What's funny is that, this FanDuel now, which to me is gambling, a lot of states are, trying to shut that down, which you're right, which is it's easy to gamble. But I kind of dove into your past, Joe, and at any time in your life, you're working in Chicago and you made a friendship in Arizona, and being the son of a Chicago cop, did the sixth sense ever come across to you and say, like, you know what, I know I'm making tons of money, I might be having a better life, but I know this is just wrong, I know this is not what I need to do? Did being the son of a cop ever come across that, what would my dad think if he found out what I was doing?
No, 1,000%. And that's part of the journey that I finally took the time to write about and try to lay out. And, I think we're all products of our environment. And the product of the environment that I was in my early 20s was at the Chicago Board of Trade, where, and I wrote about it in the book, saying an ethical trader is pretty much an oxymoron, because if you're walking the straight line down there and you're doing the right thing as a trader, you're probably not reaching successful levels. It's the ones that are in the gray area. It's the ones that are kind of looking the other way in terms of right and wrong. Those are the guys that I learned to look up to. And so, when you talk about how did my father feel about this, or what was my moral compass like, I was a product of the environment. So when the ASU thing popped up in 93, 94, it was more or less, I rationalized it in my mind, saying, okay, I'm not raping or pillaging anyone. I'm not killing anyone. I'm not stealing from anyone. I'm going to fix a game and go to Vegas and deal with bookmakers and make a few bucks. So as wrong as I know that is now, it was a process for me to get to that.
Joseph Gagliano with us here on The Closers. He is the author of the book called No Gray Areas. It's out now. You can get it on the ebook format or Amazon.com. If you were invited to a school for career day, what do you tell the kids?
I think I would look at my life now and almost like chastise myself for some of the choices I made earlier. And that's the biggest thing. The main reason why I wrote this book, guys, when I was in prison for the 14 or 15 months that it took me to type this thing, I had no intentions of doing anything with this, okay? Mm-hmm. Back in 99 and 2000, when the ASU indictments were handed down, I turned away every offer. I had at least 5 or 6 offers of greater than 7 figures offered to me to tell the story. I never wanted to glamorize it. I never wanted to Hollywoodize it. I never wanted the story out there. And after the second indictment for something that I'm telling you guys, I'm really not even sure on what I did. I believe I was low-hanging fruit for the government because of my prior in this ASU event. So with that, I really wanted to put my life story on paper, not for the purpose of ever writing a book to publish it, but the purpose was to give it to my 4 children and let them see it in black and white on print to understand some of the choices I made and why I made those choices and why my life is, why I'm writing this inside of a prison. That was my only goal. So when you talk about career day and what I would tell those kids, what I would tell those kids is exactly what I wrote inside the book. And why I wrote that book was for my children. And to outline, and if I died tomorrow, that the kids would have some type of semblance of understanding as to how my thought process was and how I arrived at certain points in my life.
Joseph, they always say people don't realize what they have until it's taken away. I'm a father of 2 young boys. George has 5 children. I teach elementary school. I mean, there's things I love. And I'm sure when you were going through that process, you kind of, like I said, you put it in a gray area and you compartmentalize what you're going to do. When you were actually sitting in prison and those doors shut every night, and then 15 months later, you actually came out, what did you appreciate the most? You're like, I can't believe I almost threw that away.
The first time I was in prison, and I feel like there's something that goes on with me when I say the first time in prison versus the second time I was in prison. It just seems so wrong for me to start a sentence that way, but I have to. So at the ASU event, when I got out of prison in 2000, I really had a attitude with me that I need to show everybody, I need to prove to everybody what I did was not me. And I felt that's why I'm entrepreneurial by nature, but I really felt I had to try to overcome the label of being a convicted felon back in 2000. And my answer to overcome that label was to become successful, was to have the monetary things, the planes, the houses, the cars, the yachts, the racehorses, all that stuff. And I was very blessed, excuse me, to achieve some financial success back in the early 2000s. But you know what? it's that old cliche, more money, more problems. And I just created more problems. And I didn't realize how blessed I had it till it was gone. And I wasn't a good steward for those blessings. And in 2008, when the financial collapse came along, I realized pretty quickly that, just what you said, you don't realize what you got till it's gone, and that's what happened.
Joseph Gagliano, author of No Gray Areas, here on The Closers, about to wrap this up here, Joe, and I appreciate you taking some time with us here today. You look back at everything that has happened since 1993, 94, and that first conviction. You mentioned two-time felon. Now, has the buzzer for you sounded on the past, and have you conquered the demons, or is that still for you a daily battle that you have to work through?
I think all of us have daily battles, but I can tell you one thing: writing the book and finally putting everything on paper and working through that process as I've had for the last couple of years has been probably the best healing that I could have had. I mean, it's enlightened my kids on the path and the journey that I've taken. It's really helped me and my wife. It's helped my spiritual direction in life. It's helped me stay focused in terms of what's truly important in this world and what's just a bunch of minutia. So I think that process has really helped me more than just maturity would have.
We put you in front of a group of basketball players. And you've got 2 or 3 sentences to tell them. What do you tell them, Joe?
I'm going to tell them not to drift. Never compromise your integrity from day one, because they're 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. The day that they drift 1 degree off center, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, they're so far off their path that there's just no way to ever get back to it again.
Pretty amazing story, folks. The book is called No Gray Areas. The author, Joe Gagliano, Jr., with us here on The Closers. Joe, thank you very much for not only sharing the time, but sharing the story as well. Really, really do appreciate it. And folks, get a chance to go out and get that. It's well worth the read. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate the time.
All right, guys. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Joe Gagliano, author of No Gray Areas. We'll be right back. More of The Closers right after this.